Xiaomi, I don't know when it started, but you've filled every corner of my world. I don't just want to be your best friend anymore. I want to be the one who holds your hand for the rest of our lives. You're my first love and I don't want to have a second. Then brushing her face, he tucked a loose hair strand behind her ear with a soft smile across his face. It wasn't loud or rushed, but slow, tender, and deep, the kind of love that lingers in every glance, every prayer, and every quiet promise of forever. The atmosphere was different this year, heavier, more urgent. Everyone knew this was their final year of high school, the year that would decide their futures. Wang Yebai sat at his desk near the window, his chin resting lazily on his palm. The light breeze pushed against the curtain, brushing his uniform sleeve. He was known as the boy who rarely spoke, who seemed to live in his own world. Cold, distant, untouchable. It had been 3 days since the new girl transferred into their class. Lu Xiaomi. Her name alone seemed to carry a certain mischief. She was the kind of girl who couldn't stay still, always whispering something to the people around her, laughing a little too loudly at the smallest things, raising her hand in class even when she wasn't sure of the answer. Some found her annoying. Others found her refreshing. Yebai had barely paid her any attention, until today. The homeroom teacher cleared his throat. Lu Xiaomi, since there's an empty seat next to Wang Yebai, you'll sit there from now on. Yebai, help her out if she needs anything. A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Everyone stole glances, some amused, some pitying. Sit next to Wang Yebai? The human iceberg? Xiaomi didn't seem fazed at all. With her books clutched to her chest, she bounced over and plopped down into the seat beside him. Hi, seatmate, she chirped, flashing him a grin. Yebai didn't reply. He shifted his gaze back out the window, his silence like an invisible wall. But Lu Xiaomi wasn't the type to be discouraged. Wow, you really are as quiet as they say. Do you ever talk? Or are you one of those mysterious geniuses who keep everything locked inside their head? Still no response. His pencil tapped against the desk, steady, unbothered. Xiaomi leaned closer, her voice dropping to a playful whisper. Hey, Wang Yebai, if you keep ignoring me, I'll just keep talking until you give in. I'm very persistent, you know. For the briefest second, Yebai's lips twitched. Not enough to be called a smile, but enough for Xiaomi to catch it. Her eyes widened in delight, as though she'd discovered a hidden treasure. And that was how it began. A cold and extremely quiet boy, and an annoyingly bright girl. Two opposites thrown together in the final year of high school. Neither of them knew it yet, but from that moment, their lives would no longer run on separate tracks. Because sometimes, the warmest light shines through the smallest cracks. The morning sun spilled gently through the wide classroom windows, painting stripes of gold across the desks. The buzz of the teacher's lecture filled the air, but Lu Xiaomi was too busy stealing glances at the boy sitting beside her. Wang Yebai sat as he always did, silent, steady, his posture straight and composed. His pen glided across his notebook in neat, deliberate strokes. Every line was clean, every word precise, as though his handwriting itself carried his calmness. Wow! Xiaomi muttered under her breath before she realized. Even your notes are perfect. Yebai didn't look up, but the corner of his ear turned faintly pink. He continued writing, as if she were just part of the background noise. Xiaomi leaned closer, whispering, See mate, can I copy yours? Mine looks like chicken scratch compared to this. Still no answer. Not giving up, she poked the edge of his notebook lightly with her pen. Come on, just let me peek. I promise I won't make it messy. At last, Yebai raised his eyes. They were dark, sharp, and distant, like a night sky that refused to show its stars. For a moment, Xiaomi froze, her heart skipping unexpectedly at the intensity in them. But then she smiled. Oh, you do look at people. I was beginning to think you only like staring at the window. Something flickered in Yebai's expression, amusement? Annoyance? It was impossible to tell. Without a word, he turned his notebook slightly toward her, just enough so she could see. Xiaomi's eyes lit up. You're not as heartless as they say. He clicked his pen shut, expression unreadable, but deep inside, something small shifted. No one had ever spoken to him like that, so cheerfully, so openly, as if his silence wasn't a wall but an invitation to be broken. Later that afternoon, during a break, Xiaomi balanced her chin on her palm and sighed dramatically. You know, Wan Yabai, you're making my senior year interesting. Sitting next to you is like trying to melt a popsicle with just my smile. He finally looked at her again, his eyes narrowing slightly. You talk too much. His voice was low, quiet, almost rusty from disuse. Xiaomi blinked. Then, a slow grin spread across her face. Ah. He speaks. She clapped her hands softly, earning a few curious stares from classmates nearby. Wan Yabai, I feel honored. Really honored. You used your first words of the semester on me. Yabai turned his gaze away, but not before she caught the tiniest twitch at the corner of his lips. For Xiaomi, that was enough. For Yabai, it was the beginning of something he hadn't expected at all. Because sometimes, it only takes one persistent voice to make silence feel a little less lonely. By the end of the first week, Lu Xiaomi had developed a new habit, following Wan Yabai everywhere. It wasn't intentional at first. Or at least, that was what she told herself. But somehow, wherever Yabai went, she ended up drifting in the same direction. When the bell rang for science class, Yabai slipped into his lab coat in one smooth motion, his long strides carrying him out of the classroom without pause. He always walked alone, a quiet shadow in the noise of students chattering and shoving their way to the lab. Wait! Wait for me! Xiaomi called, clumsily shoving one arm through her coat sleeve while the other held onto her notebook. Her bag strap dangled from her teeth as she half ran, half stumbled after him. Several classmates snickered at the sight, but Xiaomi didn't care. She finally managed to wriggle into the coat, though one side was still inside out, and puffed up beside Yabai, slightly out of breath. See? We're seatmates, so we should also be labmates, she announced proudly, as though it were some kind of victory. Yabai didn't respond. He kept walking, his expression as unreadable as ever. But when Xiaomi's sleeve caught on the edge of the doorframe, making her spin awkwardly before regaining balance, Yabai's hand twitched slightly. For half a second, he nearly reached out to steady her. Instead, he shoved his hand back into his pocket and walked on. Xiaomi quickly caught up again, undeterred. You're so fast. Do you train secretly or something? Honestly, if you keep walking this way, I'll end up getting fit just by chasing after you. Her words spilled like water, bubbling and endless. To anyone else, it might have been exhausting. To Yabai, it was exactly that, exhausting. And yet, beneath the irritation, there was a faint warmth creeping into his chest, one he couldn't quite chase away. In the lab, while Yabai set up the experiment neatly and precisely, Xiaomi fumbled with her beakers and nearly dropped a flask. Yabai sighed quietly, sliding the flask out of her unstable grip without a word. You saved me! She beamed, as though he just rescued her from falling off a cliff. Wan Yabai, you're my hero! He stared at her blankly, his silence louder than any words. But Xiaomi only grinned wider, choosing to take his lack of response as agreement. And so it continued, step by step, moment by moment, Xiaomi inserting herself into Yabai's quiet world. She never asked if she was welcome, never wondered if he wanted her there. She simply stayed. Unknowingly, she was stressing him out. Unknowingly, she was also making cracks in the ice he had built around himself. By now, everyone in Class 3 had gotten used to the sight of Lu Xiaomi sticking close to Wan Yabai like a stubborn shadow. If he went to the lab, she went to the lab. If he sat by the window, she leaned beside him. If he packed his books quietly after class, she hovered nearby with her endless chatter. To some, it was amusing. To others, it was baffling. But to Wan Yabai, it was something else entirely. It was stress. It was disturbance. And yet, strangely, it was also the only disruption in his life that he hadn't managed to push away. That afternoon, the classroom was full of noise. A group of students started a playful chase, weaving between the desks, their laughter bouncing against the walls. Naturally, Xiaomi joined in, her laughter ringing the loudest. She darted between her classmates, trying to escape their reach, her hair flying behind her. Yabai, meanwhile, was standing by the wall near the back, silently stacking his books. He had no intention of joining their games. Got you! Someone shouted behind her. No way! Xiaomi laughed, sprinting forward without looking. She turned her head to glance behind, then suddenly. Bang! Her forehead slammed hard into something solid. Or rather, someone? Wan Yebai. The impact made his whole body jerk. His breath caught sharply, and pain flared across his chest like fire. His hand flew instinctively to clutch at it, while his other hand braced against the wall to keep himself upright. Xiaomi stumbled back, stunned. At first, she laughed nervously. "Oh, that was like hitting a brick wall. Yebai, your chest is made of stone or what?" But her words faltered the moment she saw his face. His brows were drawn tight, his teeth clenched, and his hand pressed firmly over his chest as though shielding something fragile. The laughter in her throat dried instantly. Her eyes widened. Yebai, are you okay?" He didn't answer right away. His breathing was uneven, his expression twisted in pain. Around them, the classroom stilled. Everyone who had been laughing and chasing froze, their eyes flicking between the two of them. I didn't mean to," Xiaomi stammered, panic rising in her voice. She reached out a hand, but hesitated halfway, afraid to touch him. "I'm sorry, really, I didn't see you there." Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, but sharp with anger. "Do you ever think before you act?" Xiaomi blinked. He straightened slowly, still pressing his chest, his gaze burning coldly into hers. "You're in senior high now, Lu Xiaomi. Not a child running around a playground. Do you even realize how reckless you are? How annoying!" The words hit harder than she expected. Her throat tightened. For once, she couldn't find a playful reply, couldn't cover the sting with laughter. Her lips trembled as she whispered, I'm sorry." But Yebai didn't let her finish. He shoved her hand away when she tried to steady him, pushed her lightly aside, and walked straight out of the classroom. His tall figure disappeared through the door, leaving behind a silence that pressed on everyone's shoulders. Xiaomi stood frozen for a moment, biting down hard on her finger, an old nervous habit she thought she had outgrown. The sting of his words weighed heavily on her chest. Then, as if her body moved before her mind, she rushed after him. "Wan Yebai!" she called, her voice echoing down the corridor. She ran to catch up, her shoes squeaking against the polished floor. "I'm sorry! I really didn't mean to hurt you. I wasn't looking, it was my fault." Her words tumbled out desperately, one after another, but Yebai kept walking, his back rigid, his fists clenched. He didn't slow, didn't turn. And yet, as Xiaomi trailed behind him, eyes stinging faintly with guilt she didn't understand, one thing became painfully clear. For the first time since meeting him, she had truly crossed the line. For the first time, Wan Yebai's cold silence wasn't just cold, it was cutting. And it hurt her more than she expected. The classroom was unusually still the next morning. For once, Lu Xiaomi wasn't laughing with her neighbors or whispering into someone's ear. She sat at her desk, chewing her pen cap nervously while her eyes flicked every so often to the boy sitting beside her. Wan Yebai. Silent as always, his head bent over his notebook, his posture as precise and untouchable as ever. But between them, there was something different now, something heavier. She swallowed hard, then slipped a folded piece of paper across the desk. Yebai didn't move. His pen continued gliding across the page. Hesitantly, Xiaomi nudged the note closer to his arm. At last, he glanced down. The paper was decorated with a hastily drawn crying face, complete with teardrops and a dramatically shattered heart. Above it, her messy handwriting read, "I'm really sorry, Wan Yebai. Please forgive me, okay?" For a moment, his dark eyes lingered on the childish doodles. Then, without a word, he slid the paper aside and returned his attention to the teacher. Xiaomi's own heart cracked a little more. By lunch, she couldn't stand it any longer. She found him in the hallway, walking calmly with his tray, his usual quiet aura pushing people aside like an invisible barrier. "Wan Yebai," she called, jogging to keep up. "I'm sorry about yesterday, really. Does it still hurt? Your chest, I didn't mean to hit you so hard." She reached out without thinking, her fingers hovering near where her head had collided with him. But before she could touch, Yebai jerked back, eyes flashing with irritation. "I said I'm fine." His voice was low but edged, like a blade. "But, Lu Xiaomi." He cut her off, his expression hard. "Find something better to do with your time. Stop troubling me." The words dropped between them like heavy stones. He turned sharply, walking away, his long strides quick, deliberate, leaving her standing in the hallway. Xiaomi froze, her hands still suspended awkwardly in the air. For a moment, she thought she might cry. But instead, she drew in a shaky breath, clenched her fingers into a fist, and forced herself to smile, weakly, stubbornly. As his figure retreated, she called softly behind him, her voice trembling but sincere. "I'm sorry." But Wang Yebai didn't turn. Didn't pause. Didn't even look back. And in that silence, Xiaomi felt, for the first time, just how far away he truly was. The classroom buzzed faintly with the sound of pens scratching against paper, but Lu Xiaomi's desk was silent. Her head rested against her folded arms, her hair spilling across the surface like a curtain, shielding her face. Normally, she'd be the one whispering, nudging, or sneaking doodles onto her seatmate's notebook. But today, nothing. Wang Yebai noticed, of course. But he didn't turn. His pen moved steadily, his eyes fixed on the board. He told himself it didn't matter. If she wanted to sulk, that was her business. "Lu Xiaomi." The teacher's sharp voice cut through the room. "Sit up straight." No response. "Lu Xiaomi, stand up." Slowly, she pushed herself up from the desk. Her posture was slumped, her head tilted down, as though the weight of the world was pressing against her shoulders. Yebai's gaze remained glued to his notes. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look. The teacher frowned, walking closer. "What's the matter? Are you crying?" A ripple ran through the class. Heads turned, eyes widening. Xiaomi stiffened. Her hand flew up to swipe quickly at her face, but she didn't answer. She turned slightly away, trying to shield herself from the dozens of curious stares. Her shoulders trembled almost imperceptibly. At that moment, Yebai's pen stilled. Against his will, his head lifted just slightly. And then he saw them, her eyes. Red. Glossy. Fragile. For the first time since he'd known her, she wasn't smiling, wasn't laughing, wasn't endlessly chattering. She was silent, broken in a way he couldn't understand. His chest tightened, not with pain this time, but with something far more confusing. Why? Why would she be crying? The girl who never seemed to run out of energy, who never seemed to care when he pushed her away. Why was she breaking now? The teacher softened, though her voice remained firm. "If you're not feeling well, go to the infirmary. If you are, then sit down. But don't keep your head on the desk again." Xiaomi nodded weakly, sinking back into her seat. She kept her gaze down, her fingers twisting tightly against each other beneath the desk. Her lips trembled as she pinched them shut. Yebai tried not to stare. Tried to focus on the board again. But his eyes betrayed him, sliding sideways, watching her. She lifted her head slightly, catching him in the act. His gaze darted away at once, his chest suddenly warm with guilt. Xiaomi picked up her pen with shaky fingers. She wiped quickly at her cheeks, sniffling softly. Then, so quiet only he could hear, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Wang Yebai." His hand froze around his pen. But he didn't look at her. Didn't reply. He told himself it was better this way. That silence was safer. And yet, for the rest of the lesson, her red eyes lingered in his mind like an ache he couldn't shake. The next day, the sky outside was a dull gray, heavy with the promise of rain. The classroom buzzed with the usual chatter, but for Wang Yebai, everything felt off. Lu Xiaomi sat beside him as always, but she was different. Her usual chatter had quieted to a few timid words. She didn't poke at his notebook, didn't bounce in her seat, didn't try to fill his silence with her endless energy. Instead, she bent low over her desk, scribbling absently, her lips pressed together. And though she tried to mask it, Yebai noticed her eyes were still slightly swollen, her smile slower to appear. He told himself it wasn't his concern. He told himself she'd get over it. But all through class, his pen hovered uncertainly over his notes, his gaze flicking toward her more times than he cared to admit. Finally, during a quiet moment, he spoke, barely louder than a whisper. "You!" Xiaomi blinked, startled. Her pen slipped from her fingers. Yebai's jaw tightened. He kept his gaze forward, not daring to meet her eyes. "Stop crying in class." Her heart thumped. She turned toward him fully, searching his expression. But all she found was the familiar coldness, his eyes fixed straight ahead, his tone flat. "But," she stammered, her fingers curling into her sleeves. "I wasn't trying to." "You weren't trying." He cut her off softly. "But you did. Everyone was staring at you." His words weren't gentle. They weren't even kind. But there was something buried underneath them, something Xiaomi caught instinctively. concern. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, her lips curved into a faint smile. "So you noticed?" she asked quietly. That startled him. His pen paused mid-stroke. He risked a glance at her, only to find her watching him with those still fragile but hopeful eyes. His heart skipped, his chest tightening in a way he couldn't explain. He turned away at once. "Focus on class." But Xiaomi's smile lingered, soft and genuine. Even if he didn't admit it, even if his words were harsh, she knew. Wan Yebai had noticed. And for her, that was enough. Outside, the first drops of rain tapped against the windows, as though marking the quiet shift between them. After class, the heaviness between them seemed to lift a little. Lu Xiaomi's old energy flickered back, timid at first, then brighter. By the time the teacher left the room, she was rummaging excitedly through her bag. With a triumphant grin, she pulled out a small paper-wrapped bundle and placed it gently on Wan Yebai's desk. "Tofu meat buns!" she announced proudly, her smile wide and warm. "I made them this morning. Here, one for you, one for me." She unwrapped hers immediately, biting into it with delight, cheeks puffing like a squirrel. Her eyes closed in exaggerated bliss. So good! Try it, Yebai, really, it's homemade." But Yebai just stared at the bun on his desk, his expression unreadable. If anything, there was a faint look of distaste, his lips pressed in a thin line as if the sight of it was an inconvenience. Xiaomi caught it instantly. Her chewing slowed. She nudged the bun closer to him with her elbow, her eyes sparkling with hope. "Come on, just one bite. I promise it won't kill you." He didn't touch it. Instead, he muttered a curt, "Thank you," and with the tip of his pen, slid the bun back toward her desk. Xiaomi froze. The light in her smile dimmed just a little. Her fingers closed around the bun, holding it quietly. She stared at it for a long moment, her lips pressing together, her chest tightening. Then, with a sudden sniff, she stood up. Without a word, she marched over to the trash can at the side of the room and tossed it in. The bun hit the bottom with a dull thud. The sound startled Yebai more than it should have. He blinked, straightening slightly, watching her as she returned to her desk. He hadn't expected her to throw it away, especially not so fiercely, as if the act itself was an accusation. When she sat down again, her cheeks puffed in frustration, her arms folding tightly across her chest. Her eyes glimmered with stubborn defiance as she glared at him. "You're mean," she said firmly, without the slightest flicker of remorse. Yebai stared, momentarily speechless. Her childish pout, her crossed arms, the way her brows knitted together in mock anger, it was ridiculous. And yet, as he watched her sulking, something stirred in him again. Guilt. And something else he couldn't name. For once, the silence between them wasn't cold. It was heavy, awkward, and strangely alive. Wan Yebai lowered his gaze, but Xiaomi's angry little face lingered in his mind like a stubborn echo. For the next 2 days, Lu Xiaomi didn't let him forget. Whenever they walked out of class, she made sure to brush her shoulder, or her bag, against him on purpose. When he glanced at her in mild annoyance, she would tilt her head away with an exaggerated humph, as if to say "serves you right." Once, she even dragged her desk a whole foot away from his, the screech of the legs grating against the floor. She plopped into her seat with her arms crossed, glaring at the empty space she'd created between them like it was her new fortress. Yebai watched her quietly. Her small frame, her puffed cheeks, the stubborn glare in her eyes, she looked less like a vengeful enemy and more like an angry kitten trying to claw at a wall. It was cute. Far too cute. Without a word, he reached forward, hooked his hand around the edge of her desk, and dragged it smoothly back until it was flush with his again. Her jaw dropped. She gawked at him as if he had just destroyed her masterpiece. Then, with a sharp little sound, she whipped her head away, ignoring him completely. Yebai allowed himself the faintest curl of his lips, almost invisible. Later, during PE, the class emptied out quickly, their laughter and footsteps fading down the hall. Xiaomi, however, lingered in the classroom, still pouting at her desk as if she'd rather hold on to her anger than join the others. Wan Yebai, gathering his books, finally lifted his gaze. His voice was low, steady, but softer than usual. "I'm sorry." Xiaomi blinked, her arms still crossed. He glanced away, fiddling with the corner of his notebook. "If my attitude annoyed you earlier, I didn't mean to." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then Xiaomi stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. She let out a short, sharp little sound, half a hum, half a sigh, before striding toward the door without sparing him a glance. The room was empty again, except for him. And yet, instead of irritation, Wan Yebai felt a warmth unfurling in his chest. Slowly, he set down his pen, the corners of his mouth tugging upward into the smallest of smiles. That little humph of hers, it wasn't funny. But somehow, to him, it was the most amusing thing in the world. The PE teacher clapped his hands. Girls, line up for sit-up practice. Pair with a partner. Lu Xiaomi sighed as she lay down on the mat. Everyone else quickly found partners, but she hadn't even turned her head to ask for one when a shadow fell across her. Wan Yebai knelt silently at her feet, lowering himself to hold down her ankles. Xiaomi's eyes widened. She lifted her head halfway, staring at him in surprise. For a moment, her lips parted as if to speak, but then she puffed her cheeks, tossed her hair back, and muttered, "Humph, whatever." Yebai didn't respond. His hands stayed steady on her legs, grounding her as she rose and fell, rose and fell. But every time her eyes flicked up, she found his gaze calmly fixed on her, his expression unreadable. Her heart betrayed her, skipping faster than her sit-ups. After PE, everyone spilled out of the gym in sweaty laughter. Xiaomi bent to grab her bag, but before her hand touched it, someone else's hand was already there. Yebai. He slung her bag over one shoulder, his own bag over the other, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Hey!" she protested, hurrying after him. "That's mine, give it back." He didn't. Instead, he pulled an extra bottle of water from his bag and held it out to her. Xiaomi blinked. Her throat was parched, but her pride flared. She reached for her bag instead of the water. "I can carry my own things." Yebai calmly shifted, blocking her hand with his arm. His voice was firm, but quiet. "I'll carry it." Her eyes narrowed. She jabbed a finger dangerously close to his face, almost brushing his nose. "Listen here, Wan Yebai. I don't forgive you." For the first time, Yebai smiled openly, small, soft, but unmistakable. He didn't argue. Didn't explain. He just walked behind her, carrying both bags as though her words meant nothing. A couple of classmates trailing behind caught the sight, whispering among themselves, eyes wide. Was this the same Wan Yebai, the boy who never let anyone near? It didn't stop there. He pulled her chair out before she sat down. She pouted. He steadied her beaker during the next science experiment. She huffed. "I didn't need your help." He quietly set her pen back on her desk after she dropped it. She muttered, "Still not forgiven." Every gesture was subtle, wordless, his way of apologizing, of telling her he regretted the sharpness of his words. But Xiaomi clung to her role, acting stubborn, arms crossed, lips pouted, refusing to give in. Yet no matter how many times she tried to stay mad, his quiet persistence made her heart betray her again and again. Because even when she said, "I don't forgive you," her smile always threatened to break through. And Yebai, watching her, couldn't help but think, she's too cute for her own good. Monday morning came with the crisp air of a new school week. The gates of senior high buzzed with laughter, the chatter of students, and the clatter of bicycles being parked. Among them, Wan Yebai walked in, head straight, expression cool as ever. His steps were calm and purposeful, hands tucked in his pockets. He was the kind of boy who seemed untouchable, quiet, cold, never distracted. Until, bang! Someone, smacked into his back. He stumbled half a step forward, jaw tightening. His first instinct was irritation. He turned, ready to glare at the careless offender, when his gaze landed on her. Lu Xiaomi. Bag swinging from her shoulders, face bright like the morning sun, she bounced on her heels as if she hadn't nearly knocked him over. "You!" Yebai's voice was low, clipped. She grinned sheepishly, then fell into step beside him, tilting her head so her ponytail swayed. Me." He gave her a long, cold look. She only smiled wider. "I've decided," she announced grandly, almost skipping as they walked. "I've forgiven you." Yebai blinked just once. "Forgiven me?" "Yes." She nodded so hard it looked like her head might fall off. "I thought about it all week, and I realized you were sorry. You carried my bag, you gave me water, you even held my legs during sit-ups. I saw it all." Her voice softened, just a touch. "And also, I didn't want you to end up crying like I did. Yabai froze for a fraction of a second, his heart stumbling against his ribs. Slowly, almost against his will, a smile curved across his lips, gentle, quiet, but undeniably there. I knew you forgave me long ago, he said softly. Xiaomi stopped bouncing. Her wide eyes flicked at him, searching his face. Then, in a lower, almost hesitant voice, she said, I was crying back then, because of you. I was deeply hurt. The words hung between them, tender and fragile. Yabai opened his mouth, but no words came. His chest felt tight, not just from pain this time, but from something deeper, harder to name. Then Xiaomi's smile returned, bright and fearless. She reached up and tapped his shoulder lightly, like patting away the weight of the question. But it's fine, she said simply, with that same childlike warmth that always disarmed him. And before he could reply, she skipped ahead, her voice ringing down the hallway. Come on, slowpoke! Don't be late for class. Wan Yabai watched her back as she bounced forward, the morning light catching in her hair. His lips curved again, almost involuntarily. Lu Xiaomi never stopped bothering him. She leaned too far over his desk when she wanted to borrow a pen. She hummed loudly while solving math problems. She tugged on the sleeve of his jacket whenever she wanted his attention. And yet, Wan Yabai realized she didn't do it to annoy him. Not really. It was just her. Playful, full of life, always pulling others into her orbit. So he endured it. Patiently. Quietly. Almost willingly. One afternoon during study period, the classroom was hushed except for the scratch of pens and the occasional cough. Yabai sat with his usual perfect posture, eyes scanning the lines of his book. Out of the corner of his eye, though, he caught movement. Xiaomi. Her eyes kept flicking to him, then to her notes, then back again. She wasn't subtle. Not at all. Finally, he set his book down. Lu Xiaomi, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes widened, caught red-handed. What? He paused, then asked with a hint of seriousness. Are we friends now? She blinked, then broke into the brightest smile. Of course. You've always been my friend. That's why I keep troubling you. The corners of Yabai's lips curved, slow and soft, into a smile. It was fleeting, but genuine. Something about her words warmed him more than he wanted to admit. From that day, something shifted. Xiaomi sat closer. She teased him more openly. She dragged him into conversations with classmates, calling out, Don't leave him out, he's my friend too. And Yabai, surprisingly, didn't mind. He let her pull him into her world. One afternoon, as she shuffled her desk closer to his, determined to erase the tiny gap between them, her hand slipped. Bang! The corner of her desk slammed right into his fingers. Yabai's jaw clenched. He yanked his hand back immediately, tucking his fingers between his knee. His face twisted ever so slightly in pain. Xiaomi gasped, panic flashing in her eyes. She leaned close, rubbing his back frantically. Oh no, Yabai, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Does it hurt a lot? I'm so sorry. His silence made her more nervous. She reached for his arm. Let me see? For a moment, he hesitated. Then slowly, reluctantly, he brought his hand out. Xiaomi gently cradled it in both of hers, her brows furrowed in worry. She leaned close and, without thinking, blew softly across his reddened fingers. The cool warmth of her breath tickled his skin, and for a moment, the classroom around them disappeared. Yabai watched her. The girl who laughed too loudly, ran too fast, talked too much, now holding his hand as carefully as if it were made of glass. After a long pause, he chuckled under his breath. You! His voice was low, tinged with something he couldn't quite hide. You really do have different personalities. Xiaomi glanced up, blinking. What do you mean? He smiled faintly, eyes softer than she'd ever seen. One moment you're like a child. The next, his gaze lingered on her, still blowing on his fingers. You're like a sweet mom. Her cheeks pinked, but she laughed anyway, shaking his hand lightly. Then I guess you're stuck with both. Yabai didn't reply. But in his quiet heart he knew. He didn't mind being stuck with her at all. It was a breezy afternoon, the kind where the classroom felt half asleep. A group of Xiaomi's friends had pulled her into their usual chaos, a paper ball fight, giggles flying louder than their teacher would have liked. Lu Xiaomi, catch! Someone shouted, tossing a crumpled worksheet across the room. She dodged, laughing, her ponytail bouncing. Another paper ball came flying, then another. Soon, half the class was involved, laughter filling the air. Yabai sat at his desk, pen gliding calmly over his notebook, seemingly detached. But his eyes flicked up, just once, following her laughter, following the way she ran too close to trouble. Then it happened. A tall boy from the back, aiming to win the war, launched a bigger wad of paper bound with tape. It flew faster, harder, heading straight toward her face. Before Xiaomi even realized, before anyone could call out, Yabai was already there. His chair screeched against the floor as he moved. In one smooth motion, he stepped in front of her, his hand snapping up. The ball smacked against his palm with a sharp sting. Gasps filled the room. The boy who threw it paled. Xiaomi froze. Yabai's expression didn't change, his cold eyes sweeping the room once. The class fell silent. He lowered his hand, tossed the paper ball into the trash, and turned. Are you okay? His voice was soft, meant only for her. Xiaomi blinked up at him, her laughter gone, replaced with wide, stunned eyes. For once, she couldn't find words. She just nodded. Relief flickered across his face, quick, almost hidden, before he went back to his desk as if nothing had happened. But for Xiaomi, nothing was the same. Her heart thumped wildly, her cheeks burning. She stared at his back, her lips parting in a whisper only she could hear. He protected me. Later, as everyone packed their things, Xiaomi trailed behind him. She tugged lightly at his sleeve, her voice unusually quiet. Yabai, thank you? He looked at her, then away. It's nothing. But she caught it, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. And she knew. No matter how cold he seemed to the world, his instinct was to shield her. The days passed in a rhythm that no one but Wan Yabai noticed. Every morning, without fail, Lu Xiaomi would bounce into class, plopping her bag onto the desk beside his as if it were hers too. During lessons, she would lean far too close, whispering questions she already knew the answers to, just to make him look at her. And at break time, without asking, without hesitation, she would clutch his arm as they walked to the cafeteria. It became routine. Yabai told himself he should mind. That it was troublesome. That she was too loud, too careless, too much. But every time her small hand clutched his sleeve, every time she leaned on him as if he were hers to lean on, his heart betrayed him. One afternoon, as they crossed the courtyard, Xiaomi tugged at his arm again. Come on, hurry! If we're late, all the fried dumplings will be gone. Her laughter rang out like chimes, her hair brushing his shoulder as she half-dragged him along. Yabai let himself be pulled, his usual resistance nowhere to be found. He looked down at her, her cheeks flushed from running, her grin bright, her hand clutching him tightly, and something inside him stirred. Slow. Gentle. Unstoppable. Was this love? Not the fireworks others spoke of, not the instant spark. For him, it was quieter. A slow burn creeping through his chest, warm and steady, melting away the cold edges he had always kept around himself. At the cafeteria table, Xiaomi chattered nonstop with her friends, sometimes shoving half her bun at Yabai's lips, sometimes laughing so hard she leaned against his shoulder. He hardly touched his food, too busy stealing glances at her. Every expression, every silly face she made, he memorized them all without meaning to. To her, this was nothing. She treated him the same way she treated the world, playfully, carelessly, as if he were simply another friend. But to him, every little thing was dangerous. Every laugh, every touch, every tug at his sleeve was pulling him deeper. That night, sitting by his window, Yabai found himself replaying her words in his head. You've always been my friend. That's why I keep troubling you. Friend. His lips pressed into a thin line. He should be content with that. But as he closed his eyes, all he could feel was the phantom warmth of her hand on his arm. The truth was undeniable now. He was falling for her. Slowly. Quietly. Hopelessly. And she didn't even realize it. By the time the last semester of their senior year arrived, it was almost impossible to separate Lu Xiaomi from Wan Yabai. In the cafeteria, she clung to his arm. In the courtyard, she skipped at his side. Sometimes, when she was especially playful, she would laugh and cross her arms around his neck from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. You're so tall. she teased, puffing her cheeks. It's unfair. I look like a child next to you. Yabai tilted his head slightly, the corner of his lips curving. You are so small, she gasped, smacking his arm. One Yabai. He chuckled softly, the sound so rare it made her blink in surprise. As finals drew near, night study sessions became routine. The classrooms glowed under dim fluorescent lights, the air heavy with the sound of pages flipping and pens scratching. Xiaomi often insisted on studying beside him, though her focus was questionable. Sometimes she whispered questions, sometimes she doodled on her notebook instead of solving equations. And sometimes, after too long staring at her notes, her head would slowly sink down until it nearly touched his arm. Tonight was one of those nights. Her eyes fluttered closed, her breathing even. She dozed off against her desk, her cheek resting on her folded arms, so close to him that a strand of her hair brushed his sleeve. Yabai set his pen down, lowering his head onto his own folded arms. He turned just enough to see her face. Peaceful. Soft. Childlike in her sleep. His chest tightened, not with pain this time, but with something deeper, sweeter, terrifyingly precious. He smiled. A small, unguarded smile that no one else in the world would ever see. Dear Jesus. His thoughts whispered into the quiet. Please, let her be mine. Not just my first love, but my only one. Always. The prayer lingered in the silence of the classroom, simple yet profound. After a long moment, Yabai straightened again. He brushed his hair back, reached for his pen, and returned to his notes. His eyes were steady, determined. For her sake, he would study harder. For their future, he would endure more. Because one thing was clear now. She wasn't just a friend he wanted to keep close. She was the girl he wanted to keep forever. Wan Yabai had never been the kind to meddle in other people's business. But when it came to Lu Xiaomi, his silence didn't always hold. She was too careless sometimes. Too playful. Too oblivious. One afternoon, she was laughing with a group of boys in their class, swatting at one who had teased her. Yabai's jaw tightened. Later, when she bounded back to his desk, he leaned closer, his voice low. Lu Xiaomi, he said, his eyes fixed on hers. Be careful how you play around with them. You're not a child anymore. She blinked, caught off guard by his tone. For a moment, her smile faltered. Then she pouted, nudging his arm. You sound like my grandpa. But Yabai didn't smile. His gaze lingered, serious. And though she laughed it off, her heart beat a little faster. Another day, she sat in the classroom early, flipping lazily through her notes. Yabai came in and paused. Her blouse's top button was undone. He walked over, sat beside her, and lowered his voice. Lu Xiaomi, are you one of those girls who sell private photos for money? Her head snapped up, eyes wide. What? No! He gestured calmly toward her shirt. Her face flushed crimson as she quickly buttoned it up. Then, smack, her hand landed on his shoulder. Wan Yabai! Why didn't you say something sooner? He finally allowed a small laugh, shaking his head. You should be more careful. She pouted, but deep down, something warm unfurled in her chest. Sweet, ordinary moments started threading their days together. In the quiet of morning before class, Xiaomi would open her lunchbox and push bites toward him. Here, try this. He would raise a brow. Feed me? She'd say, holding chopsticks in front of his lips. He'd lean in, accepting the food, his eyes softening despite himself. And when she reached over to snatch from his lunch in return, he let her, not even pretending to be annoyed. One morning, after she slipped another dumpling into his mouth, he chewed, swallowed, then asked softly, Will you pamper your husband in the future like this? Feed him as if he were a child? She didn't even look up from her food. Of course. I'll spoil him more than a child. He stilled, chopsticks in hand, before a faint smile tugged at his lips. He looked down, eating his food slowly, letting her words sink deep into his heart. There were moments, when she leaned too close, when her laughter brushed against his skin, when her eyes shone up at him. That Yabai wanted nothing more than to pull her into his arms. To hold her and never let go. But he didn't. Instead, he would ruffle her hair gently, a quiet smile on his lips. Waiting. Respecting. Loving her in silence until she would be ready to love him back. The final day of exams felt like freedom. Students spilled out of classrooms with cheers, laughter, and relief heavy in the air. Lu Xiaomi, bouncing with her usual energy, clutched Wan Yebai's arm the moment they stepped into the corridor. "Come on, let's celebrate. My treat. We'll eat something nice, and it'll be like our little thank you to Jesus for helping us survive finals." But Yebai stopped. For once, he didn't let her drag him along. He shifted, and instead of his arm being held, his fingers closed around hers. "I'll take you out," he said simply. Xiaomi blinked. No, that's my idea. I'm the one taking you out." They stood at a standstill, her eyes fiery with mock determination, his gaze steady and cool. "Rock, paper, scissors," she challenged, lifting her hand. He sighed but agreed. They counted down. She won. Her grin spread wide. "See? It's settled. My treat." But Yebai didn't move, didn't release her hand. "I'm still taking you," he said, firm but gentle. Xiaomi pouted, but the way he kept holding her hand, so certain, so unyielding, made her chest flutter in a way she couldn't quite explain. The bus ride was crowded, the late afternoon sun spilling through the windows. Yebai guided her through the throng, his fingers laced with hers the entire way. She tried once to pull her hand back, embarrassed by the looks from others, but his grip only tightened. When they got off, he still didn't let go. And when he walked her home that evening, their steps unhurried, her laughter echoing against the quiet street, he held her hand all the way to her door. Finally, she tugged lightly, raising their joined hands between them. "Why aren't you letting go?" Yebai looked at her, his eyes calm but deep. "Because I don't want to." For once, Lu Xiaomi had no quick comeback. She just stared at him, her heartbeat loud in her ears, her lips parting soundlessly. 2 weeks later came their graduation. Caps tossed into the air, photographs taken with teachers and juniors, laughter filling every corner of the schoolyard. They stood side by side through it all, smiling in group photos, signing each other's uniforms, holding on to 1,000 fleeting memories. As the celebrations wound down, Yebai leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "When we get to college," he said steadily, "I'm going to ask you out. I don't want to be just your best friend anymore. I want to be your person. Someday." His lips curved slightly, but his eyes never wavered. "Someday, I want to marry you." Xiaomi blinked at him, stunned. Then she laughed, pushing his shoulder lightly. "Wan Yebai, you're crazy. How can you talk about marriage when we're just finishing high school?" She was laughing, but inside, her heart was tumbling, racing, confused. Because deep down, she knew he wasn't joking. And that scared her almost as much as it warmed her. "Xiaomi, I don't know when it started, but you've filled every corner of my world. I don't just want to be your best friend anymore. I want to be the one who holds your hand for the rest of our lives. You're my first love and I don't want to have a second." Then brushing her face, he tucked a loose hair strand behind her ear with a soft smile across his face. It wasn't loud or rushed, but slow, tender, and deep, the kind of love that lingers in every glance, every prayer, and every quiet promise of forever. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe now and leave us a comment how much you loved this story. God bless your heart immensely in Jesus' name. Amen.